Hey, everybody, welcome back to Amp Up the Good. I'm your host, Scott Lewis, and today I have the authors who wrote a book I've been posting out about a lot lately, and it's right here. And I have Dave Goggin, also known
Yep.
as Samurai,
No, Mr. Bonsai.
Mr. Bonsai.
That I published for 40 years as Mr. Bonsai. I've come out of the closet and now I'm David Goggin. But, you know,
Yeah.
we're still friends.
And Marty Porter. Marty
Yes,
Porter.
I'm still in the closet, but I'm here. Glad to be here.
we're looking forward to that.
Well, first of all, I've read a lot of books about the rock and roll industry, and this one was beyond anything I've ever had to tackle. It was just amazing. I want to thank you guys so much. First of all, for all the in-depth interview parts and the exact details in this book. Without that, I would not have known where I left my roach clip back in Studio D in Sausalito on the second shelf. Thanks a lot. I appreciate it.
Oh,
Hey,
our
well,
pleasure, our pleasure. Don't leave home without it.
So, I want to break this down into basically three categories today because we could go on for hours. And I would like to, um, we're going to talk about some of the hedonistic living ways of the people in the studios. The third section will be about my radio. Career here in the Bay Area and connections to Tom Donahue and Ksan and some of how all of that started, remote broadcasting and shows. And then I'd like to start off with, um, first of all, just a short synopsis of Buzz Me In. The name of the book comes from an incident, right, Marty? Yeah.
yeah, we keep more than an incident. It was a password. You
Yeah.
know, everybody wanted to get into the inner circle. If you were in the record business in the 70s, there were the different layers of access, right? You had the fans on the outer layer, and you had the business guys, and then you had the support musicians, then you had the stars, and then on the inside, where it all really happened was in the studio, right? And everybody wanted to get into those studios, but they were private places. And particularly the studio in LA, Record Plant LA, was a very private environment where people could create music. If not anybody can get in there. If you were cool, if you were part of the inner circle, you got in, and you knew that the key word to get past the nightman, and it did have a nightman, with credit to our lyricist from Hotel California. The Nightman had a goal, and his goal was to only make sure the cool people got in. And the slogan was "Buzz me in." His name was Michael Gately, so if you really knew it, it was "Buzz me in, Michael Gately" or "Buzz me in Gately." So that's where. And again, the title was chosen because not only the allusion to the Hotel California, which is a whole different part of the story, but the feeling that the studio was a private place, a creative place, and providing that security to the artist, that privacy to the artist, was a big contributor to the great art that came out of it over the years.
Yeah, right. And that's why the front doors are always locked.
That's it.
You can't just walk in there and go, "Hey, is Hendrix here? I want to say hi to him."
But more than that, the studio you could lock the studio doors from the inside.
Yeah.
So in other words, if you were not in that session and the door was locked, you were not welcome. I don't care if you were the guy, the producer paying the bills. I don't care if you were the record executive. I don't care who you were. You didn't walk in on that session of Sly Stone unless he wanted you in there.
Yeah. 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 And so we'll go back to the main two characters, and that is Chris Stone and Gary Kelgan. And
Yeah.
if I understood, I should have taken a note when I read the first page. But didn't they get spotted like $100,000 to go and tackle the record plant in New York? Because it was
Yes.
basically not
Yeah.
that yet, right?
Well, they got kind of a thing going with Jimi Hendrix. And so they felt that they could accomplish the studio with Jimmy as their first client. And they didn't have a studio yet. So they got in touch with Anki Revson, who was the newly new divorcee of the Revlon fortune. And she had just invested in Hair, the Broadway show that is famous because it was the first Broadway show to have full frontal nudity.
Yikes.
And with that fortune that she made from Hair, Stone knew her because he went to college with her new husband. And so they set up a meeting. She really liked Stone. And so he proposed that she bankroll this new recording studio for Jimi Hendrix and others. And how much do you need? 100 grand. That was a lot of money in 1968. But she pulled out the checkbook right there and wrote this check for 100 grand. And Stone got in touch with Kellgren and said, "We're on the way." And they had a building in mind, and they decided to make a studio that Jimmy wanted, that was unlike any studio at that time. Most of the studios were labeled by the owned by the record companies and the labels, and it was a very, it was like a laboratory. Guys were, suits and jackets. Abbey Road, those early days, they were all in lab coats, and it was all union. And if Jimmy was in the middle of a take, an improvised take at noon, and it was time to take a lunch break, they would just pull the plug, and that was it. But at Record Plant, one of the first really powerful alternatives to recording, Jimmy could record 24 hours a day if he wanted to. And they had the tape, and so they rolled that tape. And today, the benefit of what happened in those early days is all of those records that came out that weren't released at that time of Hendrix working at Record Plant.
Yeah. Yeah, because when you're reading the book, as the further you go into it, you see that there's this balancing act going on between Stone and Kellgren. Because you got Stone, who obviously starts to head down the business road because he's got to, keep an eye on the books. And you got Gary, who not only becomes this amazing producer and engineer, but throughout the record plant starting up, he's the guy who had a vision of how it should look, the vibe that an artist should feel when they go in there to record. And of course, it had to have the most amazing sound because that's what musicians and engineers are looking for. And he nailed all of those in all three studios. Unbelievable how his vision, he was able to pull it off. Like
They
looking
were
at that.
that balancing act you talk about is critical. It's the yin and yang of our art and commerce that defines all great artistic accomplishments. You need the artist, you need the product, but you need that business vision to keep the discipline, make sure the bills got paid, make sure that it was run like a business. And they just sort of they synced. Those two guys totally synced. Kellgren was the art. He was the vision. He had ears. He had an eye. Stone had an eye, but Stone to a great extent, and we were corrected by several of his employees, was just as creative, but in a different way. He knew how to move money around, and he knew how to get the bills paid. We use the example that until Stone realized that you could lease this equipment, and this equipment in those days was very expensive. A tape machine was $40,000. A recording console was $80,000. It was hard to make that fly, but Stone had a vision. He said, "You know what? We can lease this equipment. I can lease a car. I can lease a recording console." And that changed the economics of the business. So in a sense, they were a pair, they were a balancing act. And as the book evolves, they go up and down. They want to buy each other out. They want to push each other out. But they always came back together because they came back together because they accomplished great things together and they knew it.
Right. And I love how it was stated in the book that Gary, he was the party man. No matter where he was, there was a party going on.
Well,
Uh,
Gary was a party guy, of course, but he was in the minds of many of the top rock and rollers at the time, the artists. He had a magic touch. he could do things in the studio. It was almost like he could wave his hands over the console and set things up. And when they got the recording, he could then remix it and create things that everybody was just amazed. I knew if they came to Gary Kelgren, because he'd already created hits. But when Stone met him, he was working at a small studio called Mayfair. He was concurrently recording Jimi Hendrix, Frank Zappa, and the Velvet Underground. He was balancing those guys every day, and that was really the key to his reputation. People just knew that he could do things in the studio that nobody else at that time could do. And it depended on the equipment. And so the combination of the business again that Marty brought up, of getting that equipment, just a footnote to his pioneering idea of leasing the equipment. These guys had cars. When the money started rolling in, Kellgren bought a Rolls Royce. He had a gigantic Rolls Royce that was purple, and they would go and pick people up, to bring them to the studio. The license plate read "Greed," and Hendrick and Stone went to get his fancy car. He went to the Mercedes dealership and he bought one, and his license plate said deduct. But that's where he discovered that you could lease things because the guy said, "Hey, you don't have to buy the car, you can lease it." And he goes, the light bulb went off. Oh, what a great idea. And next thing you know, he's leasing all this 100 grand equipment for the record plant to stay ahead of every other studio in New York City and eventually the top studio in America, both in New York, LA, and eventually Sausalito.
Right. I'm talking with the authors of the Buzz Me In book here today. It's just amazing. Um, the because Gary Kelgren, his vision, especially when he saw like the vacant building that became the Sausalito record plant, because I've been there a number of times, and I was actually in the studio way back in the day for about 15 minutes when our sound engineer had to consult with them because we're going to be doing some remote broadcasting. Um, and it's unbelievable to be in there, as you know. But and for everybody else that doesn't know how recording studios make money, they charge fee, right? That's just a very simple way to put it.
You're selling time. You're
Yeah,
selling
Yeah,
time.
time is
You're selling
money.
hourly rates and you're selling upgrade and you're selling markups on tape and rental equipment. That's how you make a living, right?
yeah,
And
So
there
the,
were there
the
were
more
no clocks
the
in the
more time you
record.
work in the studio, the more money you make. And that was part of the business breakthrough was they realized that the equipment was becoming more sophisticated. The artists were enjoying spending more time in the studio. The more toys they can give them, the more tracks they could provide them on a tape machine, the more hours they were going to spend, and thus the budgets were going to get bigger.
yeah,
That was the business model, you
yeah.
know, and it worked.
Right. And then um, always reflecting back, the two artists that I always thought were hogging up so much studio time, and that would be the Eagles and Steely Dan.
Yeah.
Oh, that's
Apparently
true.
their record label said, okay, it's a blank check because we'll get it back if you give us the record.
Remember, the economics of the time was changing as well, right? So not only were there more tracks, the budgets were bigger. The budgets were bigger because they were selling more albums,
Yeah.
and the artists were demanding the larger budgets, and they were getting there. You
Hmm.
know, and they were getting them. So when you talk about a Steely Dan, when you talk about a Eagles, we talk about a Fleetwood Mac, we talk about a Bruce Springsteen for that matter, who's just celebrating the 50th anniversary of Born to Run. You
Yeah.
know, they got the budgets, but believe me, the labels were not about to spend that money unless they were getting the return. They're getting the returns, and that was a relatively short period of the '70s when the money was really flying, and it changed. It changed towards the late 70s, but during the early 70s, the late 70s, it was a heyday.
Right. Yeah. And, also the book, pretty much, if you read it, you understand where the phrase sex, drugs, and rock and roll comes from.
Well, again, we have another take on that, Scott, that it's really sex, drugs, and audio. Uh, there's a lot of sex and there's a lot of drugs in the book, right?
Yes.
A lot of, this was the only place that had a console, recording console with mirrors embedded on them, and it was up to the assistants to make sure that the razor blades were clean and neat every day. So you can imagine what took place. The sex, there was a jacuzzi and back rooms, and there's a reason why LA people thought was out. Hotel California was named after was experienced in Los Angeles,
Mhm.
right? But we can say no matter what, and there's no question that Stone and Kellgren knew the way to get business was to serve every need. You were in the service business, just like Stone thought he was a concierge. But let me tell you something: record plant would not have been anything if it wasn't for the audio. And because the real drug, if you're in music, the thing that gets you the highest is great sound.
Absolutely. Yep. Yep. Yeah, there's nothing better than going back into the control room. There's so many stories of the guys going back into the control room to listen to a track they just cut. And the amount of volume they put on those speakers is just, I'm surprised I didn't lose my hearing just reading the book, man. I
Well,
think,
you like the story of the producer of the Eagles, Bill Szymczyk, and Joe Walsh before the Eagles. He was recording a song called "The Bomber," they liked to listen at the loudest possible levels. And they had the best monitors. They had these gigantic tannoy monitors that were expensive. But wisely, Chris Stone kept a supply of speakers in case somebody blew up a speaker. Well, during the course of the bomber, they blew up speakers every day. And Stone would say, "No, don't worry about it. We'll replace them in just a second. We'll get one." They had a team that could pull out the old one and put in the new ones. But eventually it just got out of hand. The record companies were paying for this. But Stone said, we got to figure out a way. He had a guy, another secret weapon was the people that were involved in Record Plant. Tom Hidley designed a monitor that Joe Walsh couldn't blow up. And that changed the sound of music all over the world. Those monitors ended up being used because everybody wanted to listen at the loudest possible level with accuracy, with a full bass that kind of beat your chest and made the music come to life in your body. This was an incredible accomplishment by Tom Hidley. And finally, they solved the problem and created a monitor, the Hidley Kenosta. It was a special monitor with heavy wooden monkey lips, as Marty likes to call them, that solved the problem and created another lure for coming to the record plant. When you come to the record plant, you can hear exactly what you've done louder than you've ever heard it before.
yeah, right. And before we segue into the third part, which will be focusing a little bit on the Sausalito plant, I would like to talk a little bit about Gary Kellgren's work when he was working in the studios, especially the New York one for Hendrix, and then I think it was in Sausalito for Sly Stone. He 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 didn't just make the recording room and the control room a certain way, but he also built like dwellings for these guys, right? I mean, places where they could be hanging out. I think Stone stayed there all the time.
Yeah,
Well,
well,
they had a number of houses nearby.
he
Uh,
also had the pit. He also had his bedroom in the pit. So, the point was, were they doing? They were selling time. The more time they can get an artist to stay in the studio, the better.
Yeah.
And so why not make it comfortable? Why not make it relaxed? The LA back bedrooms were themed. One was kinky, one was frilly, one was nautical. They were renting that time out. He built the pit in Sausalito, an underground studio for Sly, which was a crazy invention, but it had a bedroom off the side where Sly could sleep, crash, hide away, sneak out any way he wanted. He had his own little getaway there. So it was the concept of a residential studio was becoming popular in those days. There was a residential studio up in Woodstock, Bearsville. There was a residential studio happening in Caribou Ranch in Denver. The idea of providing dwellings for their artists were very much akin with the model of we. What do? You send you rent time, you know, and you service the client whether they want a new tape machine, a new microphone, or recreational whatever for those bedrooms in the back.
Right, because that's what Chris Stone was supporting all the time, saying, I need a new Hendrix, I need a new Sly Stone, I need that one recording artist per record plant that will bring in just enormous amounts of revenue, right?
Not to get too far in the business weeds, but this is where Stone's genius was the case, which you couldn't make a living on one room. There was not enough money. But if you can get two and a half, 3 rooms, the more rooms you had, the more money you could make, and the more you could, defer the cost of the equipment and the rent, et cetera, et cetera. So get an artist who will book one of those rooms year round. Get me a Jimmy. And it was always a Jimmy. After Jimmy, the next Jimmy was Stevie Wonder. Stevie
Yeah.
Wonder booked Studio B for years in Los Angeles. They got themselves another Jimmy. He just happened to be Stevie Wonder.
Yeah.
And when Stevie was on his way out, the next client who booked it and built rooms was Sly. Always having that core basic client, that rent payer, so to speak, gave them the opportunity to expand, and that's when they became profitable.
Yeah, right, right. Well, moving to the Bay Area and the Sausalito plant, as we used to call it, just the plant. Um, First, my Bay Area radio, first of all, I was a Bay Area boy from the beginning. And I can just say this, speaking for all the Bay Area people, the only record plant is Sausalito. All the others suck.
Yeah,
For
of
years, that's
course.
all we said to everybody. Oh, no, no,
Yeah.
your record plant sucks. You don't make good albums down there. We make all the albums up here, man.
Yeah, you know what? It's an interesting point because we could have written a book about each of the record plants. And they all have their own stories. We chose to show how they were all integrated, how it started in New York, moved to LA, and then it moved to Sausalito. And that was our decision creatively. It made it more of a challenge, but for the community, the people who worked at Sausalito, that was the only place that existed, right? Now, LA and Sausalito were connected because they were both owned by Stone and Kellgren. New York was sold off after Kellgren and Stone moved to LA and built, so that was sold off to Roy Cicala, who ran it and developed his own Jimmy there. And he just so happened to name John Lennon. So the New York people think they have the real, because they had Lennon, they had Aerosmith, they had Bruce Springsteen. They would say we're the real one, right? But Sausalito, I will agree, was Gary Kellgren's masterpiece. There is no question that none of the other record plants lived up to it to fulfilling Gary's true creative vision.
Yeah. And of course, then you got the epic Fleetwood Mac Rumors LP, which is the one record everybody runs around going, oh, see,
Yeah,
Toledo, man.
we should make it clear that other than, I mean, there was one song that was done in Sly Stone's studio. That was the pit. It was this like inverse studio where the engineer sits at the bottom and he looks up at the studio with all the artists. But next door it was Sly's bedroom, and where he could go and record. He had patch lines going into the main room. But during that 9-month period of rumors, with all of the intrigue and the romance and broken relationships and all, Stevie Nicks slipped away once, and she had to get away from all that madness. And she went into Sly's room, which wasn't being used at the time, and she went into his bedroom, and she sat on the bed with a little, you know, recorder and a little keyboard, and she wrote Dreams, which was the biggest record of Sausalito legacy. So, I mean, we can't forget that.
No, no. And, being in radio during those days too, we would read Rolling Stone magazine, and then every once in a while they'd mention, Fleetwood Mac is currently recording a new album in Sausalito, or, somebody's down in LA doing one. But whenever we heard anything about somebody doing something over in Sausalito, even though we knew we couldn't get in, we'd go over, kind of walk around the place. They did have in the back area, they had an area where the artists could go outside and have a smoke or do whatever they wanted to do, get a little fresh air. We used to always hang around back there just to hear if anybody's coming out. And occasionally they'd come out and tell us to go home. But that is one of the intriguing things that always made us think about
You
the.
know, that is really what this book is about. Everybody wanted to be able to hear those songs while they were being recorded. I've been around a couple records while they were being done, and there's nothing compares to that thrill. You know what's going on in the studio is going to be heard by everybody in the world in another month, and it makes you feel like, my God, I got a short ticket to heaven, and then I have to go back to Earth. It's an incredible feeling, and we hope that we've recreated that in the book. That it takes, well, we buzz you in uh,
Yeah,
to what was going on inside, and what we have now as the result of those sessions. Um, uh, in the future, if people are riding in their spaceships on the way to Mars with Elon or whatever, even 100 years from now, what are they going to be listening to? They're going to be listening to stuff that was recorded at the record plant.
yes, they will. They better have it turned up too, you know?
Yeah.
Um, you know, uh, I want to kind of end this. First of all, I just want to encourage everybody to read this book. If you've read other books about, oh, okay, yeah, artists recording, all of that, this is not like those. I mean, this goes from, big overview of everything down to like the decibel that a guitar solo was being recorded at. I mean, it's that amazing. It's that enthralling to read. It's a page turner, that's for sure. Um, Especially if you're a liner note nerd, get this
Yeah.
book. You'll go crazy, but being my love of recording engineering. I took a class at San Francisco State when I was starting off in radio, and then we had an 8-track board in our production studio at the radio station.
8 tracks?
Yeah,
Wow.
I don't know how we got it or who decided that we needed that, but
Yeah.
also back in the day too, we had to write and record commercials for local, the record stores and audio stores and etc. So even though it all got mixed down. We did have a lot of fun. Ooh, let's put a little bit of the song on this track, and so we tried to be, recording engineers when we were in the production studios. It was so much fun.
So
Um,
you understand how it works.
yeah.
I was a DJ too, and we had to record commercials. And that's where you realize how difficult it was at that time. It took a lot of equipment, it took a lot of time. You had to be good with a razor blade to edit the tape. You had to actually non-volatile, you had to cut the tape. And that's a thrill in itself. And we've got stories about cutting tape for American Pie that you won't believe.
We
A lot
also
of
used to,
editing.
yeah, we used to have competition every once in a while. There were a couple of guys that were always claiming to be the most exact editor cutter that you could ever imagine. And so we put something together, and then all three of us would have a go at it and then listen back and go, okay, who won? Just silly things like that. But before I get into my last part, I do need to tell you a quick little story. The day before this happened, my program director was leaving for the night because I was on the air from 6 to 10 at night. And he goes, oh, by the way, Greg Allman is coming in tomorrow. So you're going to have to do a quick interview with him. I said, okay, not bad. So I brought my little acoustic guitar because I thought back in the day, everybody had the artist sign it and then you hang the guitar on the wall and that's that. So I brought it in and I said, hey, we were meeting in the music coordinator's room before we went on air. And I said, Greg, hey, man, I want you to check this out. Have you ever seen one of these? And I opened up my guitar case, trying to be funny. And he looks at it and he goes, hey, I have one of these at home. And I thought, well, just one. He goes, no, this exact model of the Takamine guitar. I have one of these. He got it out. He goes, mind if I? No. So he tunes it and he plays Midnight Rider right there for me. And then he goes, hey, I think I'll take this into the studio. I'll play a song on air. I said, yeah, sure. And so I had a sound engineer hiding behind the desk trying to get his mic levels right. And he played Melissa
Uh-huh.
Wow.
live on the air. And then he signed the guitar and gave it back to me. And so, yeah, that was
You know
probably,
the feeling, living the dream.
oh, yeah. I'm like, oh my God, like,
But I
because
think there's,
sometimes, go
I'm
ahead.
sorry. I think the important point here, besides, and I think it's an amazing story. So, but it is that alternative radio came up at the same time as the recording studio. They were happening. They were products of a record industry in the '70s. It was booming like crazy,
Yeah,
right? The studio needed to manufacture the hits. It needed to be a record plant. The radio station needed to move the product, right? And they didn't work without each other, right? And that was the vision that Tom and Rachel Donahue had. They were the big daddy and the big voices of the San Francisco area. The reason why they wanted to launch a live from record plant series was because they would have the best quality sound. They would be able to marry the best of both worlds, the distribution of a live concert based coming out of recording studio. And that whole series of live from record plant recordings are historic
yeah,
because of that. You're talking about Bob Marley, Fleetwood Mac, Endless, Jimmy Buffett, all those live recordings from record plant that K-San Radio and Tom Downey produced are an important chapter of rock and roll history that resulted from that marriage of radio and studio.
correct. Yeah, and one of the more famous ones was the Nils Lofgren live on KSAN,
Yeah.
and I actually have the vinyl copy of that because it became like an underground album. Everybody was getting until it became actual. You could obtain it. Uh,
But the Marley, that concert, the Marley session at Record Plant on KSAN broke Marley in the United States.
yeah,
Mar-
right.
Bob Marley wouldn't be the star he became if it wasn't from Record Plant and KSAN collaborating on a live concert on radio from Record Plant in Sausalito.
Yeah, because all of us who love the King Biscuit Flower Hour
Oh
concerts,
yeah.
we immediately started to pivot to the K-San's live shows from the record plant because well, they're here, and you know everybody was cranking up K-San back in the day because
I
of
don't And I don't want to blow up your feeling that the only record plant really mattered was Sausalito, but those King Biscuit Flower Hour recordings that are historic, right? Were all recorded with a record plant truck out of New York.
yeah,
So it was the New York white truck that recorded, edited, and produced every single King Biscuit concert.
yeah.
So the connection between radio and studio at that period was a critical factor in the success of the record business.
Yeah, and when you read the part about the remote trucks, the remote when you the detailed description of the the limited amount of area where these guys could sit and engineer these recorded, the programs, the concerts that were going on. blows your mind as to how great they sounded under all of these conditions, and the fact that at any second the whole thing could just fall apart, go off air, you name it, anything could have happened, right?
And it did happen. They're trying to load this huge 24 track machine into a truck to work on the Concert for Bangladesh historic album, and it falls off the back of the truck. Luckily, they always had a backup machine. I mean, the show must go on, and they were ready for this inevitable problem. A monitor's going to blow up, tape machines fall out of the truck. It was, oh man, it was tension. If you've been around it, it's maddening. But the fact that they persevered through those moments and still got that concert at Madison Square Garden, it's just amazing. And of course, you find out about Phil Spector, the producer, if he was really there.
Yeah, anytime his name comes up, I get terrified. After I read the book, anyway.
Oh yeah.
But a couple of things when we get back to amp up the good. The part about this book that suddenly just hit me when I finished it, and that was I was always so intrigued by the stories of guys that became famous producers or engineers, but they had to get their foot in the door somehow. And some of them came in and said, "Yeah, I'll be the custodian, I'll be a janitor, I'll push a broom." And then that one opportunity shows up where they need somebody to move a couple of levers on the board, and that individual just happened to be there. I think that Jimmy Ivan is one of the more famous ones, isn't he?
Oh
Yeah,
yeah, he's probably the most, well, he's the most successful of these guys. His nickname was Jimmy Shoes. He wasn't making a lot of money, but it all went into his outfit. And he eventually worked with John Lennon, and John dug this guy, this young. He was kind of a wild card in the studio, but he had a way of working with people that paid off, and now he's a billionaire because of the Beats headphones.
Yeah.
but everybody started at the bottom. That was part of the business model, right? Another part of the business, and we talk about it being a business. Stone knew early on you didn't you couldn't clone Gary Kellgren. What you could do is get a lot of kids around Gary Kellgren to make him more efficient, so he could work in multiple rooms. Roy Sakala in New York figured out the same thing with Jimmy Iovine being one of those kids. They'd come. Why, that's an unlimited resource of kids who wanted to get close to the music. I would pay. You can get these kids work for $1 an hour, 24 hours a day, and slave, and suddenly, still make money because you were making off the backs of these overworked kids. I would just spoke at a 50th annual or 50th celebration, Bruce Springsteen's Born to Run, and at his archive in New Jersey. And I gave a presentation that surprised a lot of people, which was Born to Run, I think number 21 on the 500 biggest albums of all time, classic, breakthrough record for Bruce. When he went to record at a record plant, he didn't get the big engineers. He didn't get Lennon's engineer Roy Sakala. He didn't get Shelley Yakis or Jay Massey. He got the kids. He got these kids who were basically sitting around as assistants. So he was a nobody in those days too. But those kids, for Bruce, that Born to Run was a breakthrough record. For Jimmy Iovine, it was an equal breakthrough record because he proved that he could step up.
Yeah.
And the record plant had a whole host of examples of kids who became stars. You have, besides Jimmy Iovine, who undoubtedly was the richest, became the richest. Todd Rundgren was an assistant engineer at Record Plant. Jack Douglas, famous producer with Aerosmith and certainly John Lennon, he started as a janitor.
Yeah. Yeah.
And talk about amping up the good, and I think that was always the mission. We started this book because Chris Stone came to us about 11 years ago and said he was ready to tell his story. He never wanted to tell his story beforehand. but he was very close to David personally. I knew him professionally. And he said a couple of things. He said, listen, if we're going to accomplish anything with this book, we have to make it clear that the studios existed because of a whole hundreds of kids who slaved away and many of whom never got famous. Many of them, never really, they're living on the retirement. Stone was incredibly good and generous to his people. When he passed away, so many of them came up to us and said, you know what? I bought my house because of Chris Stone. He's the one who helped me out with the down payment. Stone was a good, he could be the toughest son of a bitch you would ever believe, but to his people, he was the best. And Stone told us that if we accomplish anything, not only do we have to revive the reputation of Gary Kellgren, but more importantly, we have to let people know that those places only ran because of the those young people who weren't successful. And Dave and I made the choice to dedicate the book in a different way. We didn't dedicate it to Chris Stone. We didn't dedicate it to our wives, our kids. We dedicated those people. And I just want to read that. If is it okay?
Please.
Yeah. This book is dedicated to every runner, general, bookkeeper, studio manager, assistant engineer, receptionist, gopher, tape operator, driver, session musician, maintenance tech, and studio rat who made this all happen.
There it is. There it is. Man, that is the giving back. That's the amping up the good right there, man. Um,
Yeah.
and that's the part of the book that, after a while, I got the theme of it. And I'm like, ooh, a name popped up. I know this name, but he's at the bottom of the ladder, and I can't hardly wait to read about him going up. And a lot of times it was the engineer didn't show up, and he
Well,
happened to be there.
that's the famous story about Jack Douglas was that he was an assistant engineer on the Who. The Who came into New York, right? Who
Yeah.
was working on the album that became Who's Next at Record Plant. And his engineer, the engineer Jack Adams, historic engineer, but he was a drunk.
Yeah.
And he got totally soused in the toilet and fell asleep. The band needed to get started. Jack had worked with them the night before as the assistant. He had run out for hamburgers for the band, and he was the only one there who knew how to work the console. So go for it.
Yeah, yeah, and because
A
the
star
clock's
is born.
ticking.
Star is born.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
I'd like
And
to add that we were very, very fortunate to find this publisher, Thames and Hudson. They're known widely for artistic books, really heavy duty books with great reproduction. Our book has hundreds of photos. Many of them have never been seen before, but the book itself weighs 2.7 pounds. It's a heavy book. The paper's great. I think it's already half sold out. We haven't, they haven't told us there's going to be another printing. I'm not saying you have to run out and get it now, but it's a real book. And a lot of people are not reading books anymore. It's so easy to just dip into it online and everything. But this is a book that, it's kind of a pleasure to hold it. And the reproduction of these photos that have never been seen, it's just a pleasure to turn the pages.
yes, yeah, and because of that, you can actually go back and reread a part because I had too many times in this book because I'm like, wait, what? What did that guy do? And then when you come to the end of it, you're like, my God, the music that was created in that, decade and a half, um, unbelievable, can never be done again. The lifestyles that people lived during that time can never be replicated either. But to think that sometimes I was thinking, how the hell did we even make music back in the day with our mindsets but it all comes together when you read the book.
Well, but we talk about the genius Gary Kellgren, and I'd like to sort of bring that back because he was a forgotten character. You talk to anybody from those days, and their eyes light up because he was that guy. But he died suddenly in summer '77. He was forgotten real quickly because Elvis died that same summer, right? And the studio went on. The important point to remember though is he knew the magic formula to create a space where hits could be made repeatedly. He knew, and so much of Record Plant is that unknown quantity. How do you create an environment, a vibe, a space that brings out the best of an artist?
Yep.
And
Yep.
that was Kellgren's real art. And if you look at it, I mentioned Born to Run, 50th anniversary of Born to Run this year, right? Just released in August 75. But there were a lot of albums in 75 that came out of Record Plant. One of These Nights, The Eagles, Young Americans, David Bowie, Rock and Roll album, John Lennon, Toys in the Attic, Aerosmith. These are all 50 years ago now. And if there's any evidence that the genius of Gary Kellgren, that to build that creative space, that's it. It's 50 years ago. All those albums happened at Record Plant.
Yes. Yep. Yep. And they're still with us today. And I listen to new music now. It's there. I would like to go back into my vinyl collection and turn it up. And then, yeah, there's music. Correct. Yeah. But thank you guys so much for the book. I wish that I would have known about the book signing. I would have ran right over there and said hello and had you sign my book. But I'll just I'll just keep pimping this thing because it's just such a great read. And if you think you know it all, you don't. You don't know. And so read a book.
Hey, we can send you a bookmark that we signed. And also, this book also has a Spotify playlist. So this was always one of my dreams, was that you, as you read the book, you can pull out your listening device and you can follow the book in and listen to each record that we talk about. Because it's probably been a while since you listened to Sky Pilot by Eric Burdon, but that's Gary Kellgren pulling some tricks that you won't believe. You want to turn it up and blow up your own speakers.
Yeah. Because you will definitely start to hear music differently once you read the book and then you listen to the song. You're going,
Yeah,
oh, there's that high cymbal they're talking about. I hear it in there. Yeah.
yeah.
Well, I can hardly wait for your next book.
Really
Not
great
that I'm,
talking to you. Thank you for spending
Thank
this time with us and sharing it with your audience. We're proud of it, and we want people to hear it and listen to it and read it.
yeah.
But by the way, if there's one more message on Amp the Good, read those album credits. Every one of those little people in the little type made that album happen. You know,
Right. Don't dismiss the assistant engineer. You'll,
well, I talked about the Born to Run session. One of the album credits was a guy named Paul Prestipino. Paul Prestipino was a maintenance engineer. You got to remember a couple things about the maintenance. This was expensive, quirky analog equipment. If it didn't work, the sessions didn't happen. The most important guy in the place was the guy when the tape machine died could get it going again.
right.
Uh, they remember Bruce remembered that on his album credits, and that's a big lesson to learn about the record business. It takes a village, right?
Yes, it surely does, man. It surely does. Hey, you guys, thanks again. I'll keep telling everybody how great this book is, and you did an amazing job with this. So
Great interview. Thank you for your time.
you
Thank
got it,
you.
man. You guys take care, and hopefully someday down the road we'll hook up again over something.
Yeah,
I hope so.
let us know when you post this. We'd love to
Yeah,
hear
I
your.
will. Yeah, I think I'll do a little post production, and then I'll let you know when and where it is.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Okay, you got it,
See you
guys.
around.
See ya.
Bye-bye.
Thank
Bye.
you.